The ARKSTREAM, Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com, and of course, Arkhaven Comics. Although technically I suppose I should say Dark Legion Comics, because although this is the ARKSTREAM, today I am catching up on a belated Dark Legion announcement. So yesterday, less than a week after releasing Gun-Ghoul #1, which was quite successful and was the best #1 best-selling comic in the horror category on Amazon. We have released Gun-Ghoul 2, which is the continuation of the story. There's actually going to be 4 volumes in all, and we will get them all out relatively quickly here, because we've signed a number of folks, a number of creators to Dark Legion. Dark Legion is our imprint for stuff that we don't create, stuff that creators bring to us and ask for us to publish. And so, I think we've signed now I think we've signed 18 issues for Dark Legion already. And Gun-Ghoul #2 represents the 4th of those 18 issues. So you can see that we have a lot to do. We've got a lot to get out, and this is all while we're working on our Arkhaven stuff that we're creating ourselves. And so Gun-Ghoul is pretty interesting. I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical of it at first. It didn't really strike me as the kind of thing that I'm particularly interested in. It was clearly a little bit Punisher, a little bit Ghost Rider. But I have to admit that as I got involved in producing the digital editions of Will Callaghan's story, I actually found myself getting pretty curious about where he was going with it. And I have to admit, I've read the whole thing now, and it was not what I expected at all. And that, to me, is one of the signs of a good comic or a good novel, or sometimes even a good song, in that it's not completely predictable. You don't know exactly where it's going to go. And for me, anyhow, that makes it a lot easier for me to continue to be interested in something. So this is the cover of Gun-Ghoul #2. As I mentioned, it's already #1 in the horror category on Amazon. I think we've got like 5 or 6 in the top mystery, suspense and thriller category, so it's nice to see that again too. The art style of this issue is a little bit brighter than the first one. Will tends to swap out his artists and his colorists, from issue to issue, and I'm not certain that I would want to do it for Alt Hero, but it works for him, and it works here. The character there, you may remember they talked about the death of someone named Reynolds. So this is actually a flashback a week before the events of the previous one, and some of the Chicago crime lords are getting together in a Chinese restaurant. And then I actually forgot to show this. This is just the title page, Raising the Dead issue #2. One thing that's going to be interesting about when we release the print edition is Will provides us with about 3 covers per issue, which is 2 more than we ever do for Arkhaven. So it's actually quite nice. In fact, now that we're planning to do the premium editions of the Alt Hero comics, I begin to see the wisdom of just proactively preparing multiple covers. We're not into the Marvel game of, oh, we're going to publish 40 different covers for the same comic and try to take advantage of the collectors. We're not playing that game. But because we are releasing the Alt Hero comics in 2 different form factors, the smaller Royal Octavo and the larger 10x7, we are going to put different covers on them just because they are 2 distinct products. So that's the title page. And then, so I mentioned that the story begins with the crime lords meeting in the Chinese restaurant when, lo and behold, somebody makes his appearance. And as before, he is looking for justice. So that's just a very brief taste of Gun Ghoul 2. If you're interested, you can see the Amazon link below the stream on YouTube, and you can find it on Amazon in the #1 position in the horror category for comics and graphic novels. The reviews have been great. I believe there's already 9 reviews that have been posted, and all of them are 5 stars, which is nice to be able to say. So Gun Ghoul is #2 is out, and if you've gotten interested in the story, I highly recommend checking it out. And in answer to those who have asked if we are going to do a print edition, we're not doing individual print issues here. We're doing a single 100 and something page paperback 10x7, and it should be really good. I'm really happy with because we have all these covers to choose from. We're using an image that you won't have seen even if you have all the digital editions, and it's going to be, I think, a really good release for Dark Legion. And it's been really interesting to if we can segue a bit from the individual comic to what we're doing at Dark Legion in general. It's been really interesting to see how some artists are saying flat out, we don't want to work with you. We don't want to work with Arkhaven. We don't want to work with even with Dark Legion because we don't like your politics. Okay, that's fine. But what people may not realize, what some of these artists clearly don't realize, is that with Dark Legion, we're just publishing it. If we don't like the content, we're not going to publish it. But we're not actually exercising any editorial control over the content. And so these are not our stories. These are not my stories. These are the stories of the creators, and we're simply a conduit. We're simply a publishing conduit for them to get their stuff out there. And Will's very pleased with how it's going. I believe Brandon, the author of Chicago Typewriter, is very pleased how his stuff is going. And so it's proven to be useful. We already had to set the infrastructure is already there. We had to do all of this stuff for Arkhaven, and so it just seemed kind of foolish not to allow other creators who are already creating stuff, who are looking for outlets. This is one that they can use because Marvel is not open to most of them, DC is not open to most of them, and frankly, I don't think it's going to be long before we're going to become the preferred destination for most independent comics. We've got some, I can't really talk about it. I can't talk about it at all yet, but we have some very significant announcements that we're going to be making in the next probably month or 2 here. And I think that's going to really make a big impact on how people look at the possibility of working with Dark Legion, and to a lesser extent working with Arkhaven. In the case of Arkhaven, that's that's where we're making the calls. And so we're very picky about who we work with. We're very careful about who we work with. And we're making sure that we're working with folks whose artistic visions are directly in line with our own. I have to admit, the style of Gun Ghoul is not something that I would have ever come up with. Frankly, the storyline is something that I would never have come up with. But that's the benefit of working with these great artists and writers who are doing their own thing, because there's plenty of interesting stories out there to tell. I can't tell them all. Even the legend Chuck Dixon appears to have tried, but even he can't. And so, it's going to be interesting. We're going to be publishing a number of other of these 4-issue series from Will. We're doing Tech Lore. We're doing Grimm. And we're also going to be doing a new one called Dragon Seed that he just brought to me this week. And it'll be interesting to see how things continue. I'd like to see a lot. I'd like to see more Gun Ghoul, frankly. I'm quite intrigued with what he did with it, especially with the way that he went in a direction I was not expecting. There's a question: what do you think of Sargon? Not much. I respect the role that he played in Gamergate, but he's not a significant thinker. He's got a big audience, and I certainly wouldn't reject working with him. Like I said, I always make time for my former fellow Gamergaters. So if Sargon wanted to do something with us, I'd be happy to talk to him about it. But I think Sargon's better as activist than intellectual. Should we try to get local comic book stores interested in their comics? Well, we're in the process of doing that. Ingram has just sent 4 Arkhaven and Dark Legion comics to all the UK comic shops. They're following that up. I do appreciate that people are doing this. I love that you guys are taking this kind of initiative. The important thing to do, though, is to make sure that you mention that sign up with Ingram. Ingram will give you good payment terms. Ingram will give you ready access to all the 500 best-selling graphic novels. And so we're going through Ingram. We don't go direct to the comic stores. So it's very important to make sure that they understand that. But yeah, it is a smart way. It's always a good idea to bring them something and show them something. That is always fantastic. And if you're doing that, we very much appreciate it. Now, one thing you might get some pushback on the smaller form factor that we've got, so make sure that you let them know that we are going to be introducing the 10x7 premium versions of those small ones. What we found is that readers love the $2.99 versions. Comic stores don't seem to be quite as enamored of them because it's a new form factor, and they're already having to account for 10x7 and the regular comic form factor and a couple others, and so having a new one is not necessarily on their short list of things that they would like to do. Do you think the Indiegogo model is sustainable long term? No, I don't believe so. Let me modify that a little bit. I don't believe it is sustainable for most people. For someone like an Ethan Van Sciver, yes. He's a great artist. He's got a big following. He can produce this stuff himself very easily. He doesn't need the infrastructure. For everybody else, for people like us, I don't think that we can just keep going back to the same well over and over again. We need to get the infrastructure set up and the flow business going, and people coming directly to the stores, both online and brick and mortar. And that's what we're working on. I've been saying from the beginning that we're focused on the infrastructure. That's what my meetings tomorrow are based around, and so yeah, we'll keep it covered. So, but speaking of Indiegogo, we will be doing a major campaign there very soon, probably as soon as next week. So keep an eye out for Alt Hero Q. The quality of the team that we've put together is the best that we've done yet, and I think it's going to be big. And the script that Chuck Dixon has given is the best that we've seen yet. So anyhow, thanks for tuning in. This was just a brief announcement of Gun-Ghoul #2. Check it out. The look inside on Amazon lets you see, I think, 4 or 5 more pages. And as always, we appreciate your support. If you're around, there'll be a dark stream tonight, so feel free to stop by again later. Have a good evening.